Good morning.
Good morning or good afternoon where I'm from, but how's it going?
Nice. Great, great. So this morning we have, or afternoon, depending where you're at, we have Antonio Aloia, author, martial arts extraordinaire. Uh, so tell me, Antonio, a little bit about your background. I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. Well, one, thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
Two, more, background about myself is I started training martial arts when I was a kid.
Wow.
The funny thing is that it was kind of like a family affair. Really,
Uh-huh.
my parents were really into it. And wherever they went, we kind of went. Me and my sister went. So it kind of became this whole family affair thing. So from a very young age, I started doing Tang Soo Do, moved into Aikido, and then just some of the other stuff as I grew up until I kind of really focused in on Aikido, and then I branched out into doing Judo. Um, a few years ago, but you know martial arts have been for like the good 20 plus years of my life that I kind of remember have been like, a major part of it. It's like, oh, hey, look, it's Wednesday night, we got to go out and train. So it was already part of that schedule. Um, so what's kind of funny is that like I've kind of made this thing that was part of my life for 20 plus years. I kind of made it into this bigger interest where when I went to college, I wound up going into history. I was really into history, and actually martial
Okay.
arts moved my love of history into the direction of Japanese history. So like I have
Right.
so many samurai books, like it gets tiring just to count it. But but like it just kind of went that way. And then when I went to college, like my final paper that I wrote, I wound up morphing like those two loves together, and I started to do a whole thing on martial arts history. So
Yeah.
uh, that hasn't stopped since when did I graduate undergrad? Since 2017, and then I, spent more time in grad school doing martial arts history. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the short story of my background.
Gotcha. That's awesome because I would guess by this point it's almost like eating, breathing second nature, right?
Yeah, it really is. And because it's so second nature, um, sometimes the family will just divulge into a martial arts conversation. And it's just like, how we get to this topic? Oh, it was just over dinner. And then it's like, boom, here it is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, like other families would be sports. Ours is just martial arts. So,
That's a great focus. That's a great focus, especially as a family, you
yeah,
know?
it has brought us together. And there was, you know, I mean, we were all teenagers, so there was a bit like, no, no, I don't want to do it. But then, like, it really has in recent years, it really has brought us more and more together. So, yeah,
So,
martial arts in general have been really great for me and for my family.
so besides the martial art yourself, what do you think that sort of practice, that sort of exposure, what are some of the values and some of the things that it gave you as far as in life in general? Um,
Yeah, so and one, it gave me a routine. So there was like a physical element to my life where like I knew I didn't have to go out to sports to do anything. It was like, hey, it's already built into the routines, built into the schedule.
right,
So there was actually a bit of an indirect emphasis on physical fitness, and which has
right.
now actually moved me into going to the gym more often than once a week. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah,
Another one is that like it just kind of opened up this whole different culture. Like, so I take Aikido and Judo as like my main arts. So it really
right,
opened up the fact that like, hey, there are different cultures besides whatever we consider the American culture here. So there's different
right.
things that we can learn and appreciate, and kind of contextualize what certain groups of people do because their culture kind of tells that. So it gave me an early appreciation for a different culture. and which has then helped me just kind of realize that everyone has their own context, their own background. So, I would like to try to find out a little more about that so I don't make, uh, very shallow judgments of people or very shallow um uh whatever of people, you know what I mean? Something like that. So
Yeah.
it's, so it's not being so ignorant of the fact of anything else. Um
So
on the more
I
physical
agree that anytime you're exposed to a different culture, it expands your mentality, your life really in ways that you wouldn't have had otherwise, honestly.
Absolutely. And on that end, it actually helps you view some things differently from a different point of view. Because it's like if you're
Yeah,
stuck in, or if you only know A, then you're looking at all these things as one thing. But if you
exactly.
kind of understand or have a grasp on how other people and how other cultures and civilizations look at the same event, then maybe you can, take that one negative, whatever that is, and turn it into a positive by looking at it in a different light instead of just keeping that one track mind from what you kind of grew up in or
Well,
not grew up
right. I think one of the unintentional consequences of that too is the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, and see things from alternative perspectives. I think, especially today, right now, that's a skill that a lot of people tend to be lacking. So I think it's invaluable to be able to respectfully look at things from other people's perspectives, whether you agree, whether you disagree. Um, I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally wholeheartedly agree with that. And yeah, I mean, we can apply that any way, honestly, any which way, shape, or form within our society today, and it would just be a little bit. I don't think easier, but it would be more civil and would be less frustrating if we kind of solve that point of view from the other side before making any decisions or judgments. So,
Agreed.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a helpful skill, and and that's one of the things that I mean. I've done a little bit of martial arts, not much. I've had limited exposure, a little bit Hapkido, and Krav Maga, and a few other things uh, throughout my time. And I'll tell you, it's an incredible experience. There's just this fluidity from having that practice that overflows into your life.
Hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, that's my
And
experience anyway.
no, absolutely. And you're building up fluidity that like there is not only like the philosophical, the moral, ethical, and anything else you want to put in there, just like um, fluidity um, of the fluidity that martial arts can bring to you, but there's also like a physical fluidity that the martial arts can bring to you. So,
Yes.
like physically, doing martial arts should make you know how to move your body a little bit better than someone who isn't doing much on the physical side.
Right.
Um, and once you know how to move your body, you can move your body um, in different ways in different contexts. And point, the stuff I learned from Aikido transferred over, not fully transferred, but there was aspects of Aikido that transferred over to Judo where
Right.
I was getting some things maybe a little bit quicker than some of my peers because I had some foundational stuff from Aikido. And
Right.
actually, about like 2, 3 years ago, I took up Olympic fencing, and still
Oh, that's
from
cool.
still from the foundation of Aikido, I put it into Olympic fencing. I'm like, oh crap, these are the basic things that we do over here. We're just turned a little bit more. So like the physical foundations are there, and you can also say that like if you start with judo, you can once you know how to move your body in whatever context that is, you can take that foundational knowledge and put it to different activities, and that's to me is also amazing. Um, just
Absolutely. I mean, body awareness is
yes,
key, and situational awareness is key. And these are things that a lot of people aren't connected to. And that's one of the things I think that martial arts lends itself towards. especially. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And physical awareness and is really physical and spatial awareness I feel is really really important because that really one makes you aware, then it ends problems or issues before things can happen. Like if you're going to
right.
bump into somebody, you're like, oh, hey, look, no, there's, and then
It's like, yeah,
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 it's like, okay, cool, sorry, man, right? So then you don't have to get into whatever scuffle that may be or whatever else.
right.
So, uh,
But but
yeah,
that
so
that is, I think also, because people think martial arts are like, oh, fight. Well, there is so much more to it than that, and in many cases, it's a matter of diffusing and redirecting, um,
mhm.
than anything else from my experience and perspective. But I don't know what your insight into that might be.
Well, yeah, diffuse and redirects. Honestly, yes. There has been. I just want to make sure that I'm saying this right, so I'm not boring you with the scholarship. But martial arts scholarship has basically said that the martial arts of old, or what we consider to be battlefield techniques, have been, I don't want to say watered down, but they've been heavily modified
Yeah,
to fit the context of civilian life.
yeah.
Because what you can do on the battlefield or in a very tense hostile situation is not the same thing you want or should be doing in a civilian context, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I was in the military, Army medic for many years, and so it's just, you're right. There's a different mentality there, and knowing, and that was an adjustment for a while, knowing when to pick up these tools and use those, and when to put them down, and important.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
might see things ahead of time that other people don't see, and then the other thing is too, exposure in that your um awareness of what's dangerous and what's not, what's a real threat versus what's not, might be a lot different than other people which consider themselves civilians. You know,
Right, right. Absolutely. And because we're dealing with a civilian population, the overall purpose for martial arts, I'm just going to use that as a general term. The overall purpose
yes,
for martial arts is not to go out there and fight each other to the death or
right,
anything else that would be in a hostile situation. It's more of
right,
how can we, in one sense, it's how can we keep this lineage alive and still honor that earlier tradition, but then also make sure that we're fitting it to the confines of the civilian people, because 9 times out of
right,
10, the people who are coming into martial arts, I'm just going to say, like, now in the last 20 some years, are not actively in a hostile situation
right,
in some way, shape, or form. It's people have done it for hobbies, people have done it for um uh physical prosperity, physical health. Others have done it for social aspects. So there's a lot more reasons for the civilian population to do martial arts than just to fight. If
absolutely. I agree. Those, I mean, while it is a valuable skill in that aspect, the overall skills are invaluable as well. I
absolutely, absolutely,
I
and
agree. The
and
principles, the practices, and you've gotten into that. That's something that you've dug into, from what I understand, the history, basically the evolution of martial arts, where it came from and where it's at, and from knowing that, where it might direction it might need to go. You know, uh, I don't know what are some of your thoughts on that. I know you probably have a few.
just a few.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah, so with history, there is a big thing, at least for me, is like to know where have you been or where we've been. We
Right.
we can use that we to connotate groups of people or societies or whatever have you. But in terms of martial arts, it's like where have we been, or yeah, where were we like 50 years ago, and where are we now? And then
Right.
how is that going to affect us in the future? Um, so like my recent project is about judo, actually, specifically a judo pioneer in Philly during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The way that he taught judo is drastically different from how people teach judo now. And if we go even further back, how the founder of judo, Jigoro Kano, and his early students taught and trained judo is very different from how this pioneer, Takahiko Ishikawa, trained judo compared to how judo players of today are training judo. And
So what could you say might be some of the similarities and some of the differences that you've observed?
sure. So the throws themselves, like the basic format of the throws, they have
Right.
stayed consistently or consistent throughout the years.
Right.
Like since Kano died in 1932, 33, um, you know, things were standardized. There was small variations between practitioners, but the general canon, if you will, of judo was like, hey, here are these main 60 throws. That's it.
Right.
But then there's variations. So moving forward, um, there was more emphasis placed on competition. Um,
Okay.
there's varying degrees of how that competition um, affected judo practice um, in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and the early 60s, because nothing was really nationally unified, at least over here in the United States. Nothing was
Gotcha.
nationally unified. So what one school, what one region was doing, varied from what another region was doing judo wise. Um, when judo became part of the Olympics in 1964, um, a lot of things changed because then judo needed to be palatable for the rest of the world. What I mean by that is the overall rule sets of coming together and playing judo with each other, or trying to throw each other in a competition sense. So the rules started to change, and well, actually, once you get to the 1980s, a lot more rules have changed from should we start picking up people from the legs, or should we not do that because that's much more like Greco-Roman wrestling. And then of course by the 90s, early 2000s, you had Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu come out, and there was more changes of grabbing the legs. There's no more grabbing of the legs in modern judo now because it's so similar to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the Olympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee, IOC, has made it so that has affected the way that people train today. That has also affected how people trained back in the 70s, 80s, 90s,
Right.
because it's all about fitting the context of judo into that rule set. Um,
Right.
so because of that, techniques then start to change. Again, the base techniques stay the same because they are the foundations. There's more people doing variations and what's considered, pardon my French, a half-assed version of whatever throw it is, right?
Right.
So, um,
Well, it's interesting because throughout history, right, a different cup or different container is used, and the art
mhm.
itself has adapted to that cup or container, uh, largely shaped by the social expectations and structures and needs at that particular time.
Yes, absolutely. And just like what we touched upon a few minutes ago, like how um, the change from a military art to a civilian art, we had we
Right.
we had to change that cut, because if we wanted to keep doing this, we have to change just so much just to keep it alive right here. So
Yeah.
um what's funny then is, you kind of bring that up, because that um there have been changes with modern judo, i.e. you can't touch, grab for the legs. They've changed some of those like full bodies sacrifice throws and everything. But because that they changed that emphasis on, it's the stand-up game, we throw and then we can kind of grapple a little bit for, 10-20 seconds.
Right.
I haven't looked at that specific part of the rule book in a little bit, but it's very short. But you see a lot of modern judo practitioners move over into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because there is more of the leg grab, more of the leg takedown, and there's more
Right.
time to spend on the ground to create the best submission that you can. I
Right.
know that those are all kind of general ways of describing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but
Of
for our
course.
context here, that kind of works. So it's kind of odd, because judo in of itself has a whole ground curriculum, which depending on which historian and which practitioner you talk to, a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu has that same foundation.
Right.
But Brazilian jiu-jitsu has then split off into its own unique art. So it's kind of funny how modern judo practitioners, yes, there are a whole ground curriculum for them. They still move over to Brazilian jiu-jitsu to get maybe a more specialized version of ground grappling.
Right.
So now there is a merging, yeah, kind of a merging between judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, that it's, again, like I said, one's the ancestor art, one's the branch off art, and now they're coming back together. It's kind of weird, it's kind of odd, it's also kind of exciting to see where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So
That
yeah.
is that I don't know. That's to me, that's one of the interesting parts of history. If you want to look at history, how things develop and evolve, and what factors influence that which direction things grow and evolve. And that is to me the essence of history. Just and you apply that to martial arts, that would be the essence, how the branches grow and what form they take based on, influences of the time, needs and demands of the time, right?
Right.
Because obviously the thousands of years ago, the normal citizen might have had to fight to survive. Generally, we don't have to concern ourselves with that. Um, so it's just definitely a different focus.
Absolutely. I'm very thankful that, me and everybody else that I know doesn't have to physically fight to survive, because I'm pretty sure we'd be very miserable people, very angry people.
Probably, probably. But so, could you tell me a little bit about the newest book you have coming out?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, like I said before, it's concerning a judo pioneer in Philadelphia, and actually a little bit in Virginia Beach. His name is Takehiko Ishikawa. He was actually a Japanese transplant um, by 1955-56. So he wound up he trained in Japan, and he wound up winning the All Japan Judo Championship, which is like, the World Cup over there.
Right,
In 1949 and 1950. And he specifically went to college uh to train and teach judo. So he was, by 30, because he spent some time in the Japanese army. He was just a truck driver, so he didn't really see much action. Um, so by the time he was 30, he was like, yes, I want to do judo for the rest of my life, and that's
right,
essentially what he did. So he wound up he wound up training or teaching the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department for a time, and then he traveled over to Cuba, um, stayed there for about a year or two until Fidel Castro and that whole political scene kind of blew up, and he's like, I need to get out of here, like anybody would.
Right.
So we wound up finding a home in Philadelphia. One, because there was a Air Force at the time, was called the Strategic Air Command. It changed in
Right.
like the later 50s to Air Force. But there was a Air Force guy who wanted to put together a judo program for airmen. So there was him, and then there was a second person, more or less a private citizen who was taking judo, and she wanted him to teach at the Philadelphia Judo Club. He makes his home in Philadelphia. He comes over in 1956, 57, and he stays there for uh, a, like 2 decades, for 20 years, building up judo around in and around the city. Um, Even going as far as New York, New Jersey, Delaware, a little bit in Maryland. That's where some of his students went to later on. And then he took a semi-retirement down in in Virginia Beach, but they had, or he had, some still connection with West Point down there with the National Guard, so he trained some of those guys a little bit there, back and
Right.
forth. And I'm giving like the SparkNotes version. Um, but the, you know, but then he moves back to Japan and passes away there. Um, so there's this guy that's been in the United States for about 30 odd years.
Yeah.
He was in Philadelphia, uh, and he was one of the top judo people to come out of Japan and relocate and spend most, if not all of his adult life here in America. And not a lot of people know about him, except for the people in this tri-state area. Um,
Right.
uh, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware, New York, etc. Um, so in one way, actually a major way, it's to bring light and more information about this, I feel, important judo practitioner on the East Coast, and bring it more towards the judo community. Be like, hey, look, there's someone that was really cool over here. Please find out more about them. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And
So
and and so what
yeah,
was it that it's because I mean there's a lot of martial artists throughout history and judo, I'm sure. What specifically drew you towards this particular gentleman, this martial artist, and what inspired you to share his story?
right. So when I started judo, I actually started judo at the college club when I was in grad school. That college club was under the direction um of another school whose teacher was a student of Ishikawa. So when
Mhm.
the club would go over to that leader school, um, there would be a picture of Ishikawa, black and white, with his glasses on. Actually, I think there was two pictures of him. But on the wall, and there's like no plaque saying who this was. There's nobody talking about him, except for the teacher and some of the other older uh Jew practitioners that would come in from time to time, be like, "Oh yeah, Ishikawa, this Ishikawa." That. I'm like, "Who the heck is Ishikawa?" Right? So, right. So, like, they had him up on the wall. No one's talking about him, and no
Right.
one was like relaying any stories to the class or anything. So I'm like
Who
Sensei,
is this
um,
guy?
yeah, yeah, literally. Like, yeah, who is he? Oh, well, it's Takehiko Ishikawa. Okay, thank you, Sensei. So I'm like, okay, well, then I'll just find out more about him.
Right.
I did a search. I go to Wikipedia because every real historian uses Wikipedia, right? So
Right.
so
Of course. It's a good start, right?
I go there, and his page is like less than 200 words. Like, the heck is this? Right? So that small thing was like, there has to be more about him, because Sensei is having him on the wall for some reason. He has to be important
Right.
somehow. So that little thing kind of steamrolled into interviewing the Sensei, having having him put out feelers, me going out trying to find other former students of Ishikawa, and kind of create this oral history and piece it together of Ishikawa, both of his time here in America, but also his, just his life.
Right.
So, uh, what started as just a project of like, I just want to find out more, turned out to be like, hey, this is kind of something important that I need to share with everybody else. And
Right.
what's actually, um, you know, I think it's cool, or amazing, is that I wound up actually getting in touch with uh, one of Ishikawa's daughters, the younger one, and we had like two or three different phone calls that she just kind of dumped all this information on me. I shouldn't say dumped. We had it going back and forth. Um, so like there was even, I mean, so before it was the student's firsthand account of Ishikawa. Now I'm getting uh the firsthand account from Ishikawa's actual daughter, who was there for most of the time. Um,
Right.
so like, so with that being said, um, this biography of Ishikawa is one of the most detailed ones that, um, I think that's really out there. And I don't mean to be so um high and mighty, but like, from the other sources that I've read, this is really detailed. So,
Right.
um, I won't say it's blow by blow, but it's close to blow by blow. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, um, Ishikawa's the guy for you.
Nice. Nice. No, it's great how basically saw this little strand and you're like pulling at it and then you dig and dig and you find this whole story, that now you're like, yes, this needs to be shared. And so that's cool. And from you said, it's one of the most detailed accounts of him to date.
Yeah, and I really hope that I mean, and honestly, if I missed anything, that's on me. But if someone wants to make something even more detailed, then they can definitely use my book as a big resource. So
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
cool.
yeah, it was intensive, and that's kind of what the history thing is just keep going down that rabbit hole until you're like, hey, this is like the Matrix. When should I start digging myself out of this? So
Right. All
yeah,
right, I got a
but
rope. When should I climb back up? Right.
yeah. Let me just take a break and
Right.
then
Right.
and then come back in. But yeah, there was just aspects of his life that were a little frustrating trying to piece together because there wasn't a lot of stuff to go on.
Right.
Um, so I so you know to that end, I hope it is the most detailed, and it is, I feel, the uh more chronologically put together one where there's a lot less things missing, or there's hopefully no things really missing. But that's
There
up
you
to
go.
the yeah, but that's up to the reader to ultimately decide. But yeah.
So, what are a couple of things that, as you discover the story, were most inspirational to you, that kind of moved you the most?
um I think what really got to me was the fact that he just kept doing what he felt like he needed to do. He taught judo, and that was it. Um, there's there's one story that I remember. There was a student who got injured, and who couldn't pay for the for the month by
Right.
month basis. So he wound up paying for the class. Um, he was I don't know, a brown belt, and later on he got promoted to black belt. And when you're black belt, you pay just a little bit more. At least that's what I got from this story. So when the student got all better, he got his black belt. He's like, okay, well, I should really be paying Ishikawa back. So he started paying the black belt rate. Ishikawa saw this, and he's like, no, you pay the rate that you were doing before. Just
Yeah.
yeah, just just don't just don't worry about it. And the practitioner's like, well, sensei, I'm trying to pay you back. And Ichiko's like, no, it's pay that amount, and I'll see you on the mat. So he was not, his main motivator was not money. His main motivator was not making it big. His main motivator was, I'm here to teach judo, and people are expecting to learn something. So
Right.
I'm gonna go out and teach. It doesn't matter if I'm not making that much money. I'm just gonna go out there and teach.
Right.
Um, yeah, so
Because he felt so strongly that this is something that needs to be shared, and
absolutely,
you know, yeah.
absolutely. So that was one of the main takeaways that I got from that. An, Another one, and I guess it's a little more on a personal note with him, is that since he wasn't making that much money, he 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 wound up having to talk to his benefactor, who was his private citizen that helped him relocate to Philly. Um, Ishikawa had to go and ask this private citizen, his backer, his benefactor, to essentially like adopt his kids because he can't raise them. And also at that time he wound up getting a divorce from his wife, who at that time he didn't see for like a decade.
Wow.
That's a whole story that
Yeah.
everyone should read once they get the book. But um, yeah, so the benefactor winds up adopting his kids to make sure that they are taken care of. So he also had a care for the people around him. One is kids, absolutely, but there's also other stories too where he cared so much about um some of his students that he would go this way, he would go that way. That like when I first read them, and even when I'm reading them, and actually the one story that I'm remembering right now, I don't want to give too much away because
Right.
all these things are so interesting, and I could just keep on ranting. But when I was reading it the first time, when I was writing it and reading it again, like there was such a big connection between again, another one of his students, and Ishikawa, and like I still sorry, I still get a little emotional when I read it, because it's that wholesome, right? And
Right.
sometimes when you think of martial arts people, or teachers or pioneers, you don't really see them as humans, or heartfelt, or having a hallmark moment with students or anything like that, right?
Right.
So this was actually like, a for me, a breath of fresh air, to be like, oh my God, there was some. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, sensei this, oh, sensei that. It was a very student teacher uh uh relationship that was
Right.
um that was just in some sense equal. So
Right.
uh,
And I think that's probably one of the most fascinating aspects about history is the relationships and the whole story, because it's never as clear cut as you might think. There's always, something going on that you didn't expect. There's always more to the story. And it's great to show that, as you say, that human component, along with, this is the role that I'm in, you know, at the same time, there's more to him than just that. And that's cool that you showed, basically you're showing the heart of who he was. And that's important. And I think that's something that we need to share with one another, as people, as men, just the heart of what we care about, what are our passions, and what are we doing, or where are we going to fulfill those, and how are we helping others along the way. And that's, to me, invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I feel knowing that human side of people makes them a lot more relatable. It's not
Right.
just just give an example. It's not just, oh, it's George Washington and he's the first president of the United States. Well, it's George Washington, he was first president of the United States, and then here's all this other stuff that actually made him human. I mean, like,
Right.
not to drastically change subjects, but he was he was a self-conscious teenager, and what being male and all this stuff. And when because I did it, he did it, everyone else that I think I know that that were teenage boys that didn't know what the hell they were doing with themselves, they went and they sought advice elsewhere, not from their parents or uncles, but they sought
Right.
like self-help books and everything. So
Right.
like that's like, oh wow, so George Washington, first president of the United States, was an awkward teenage boy just like me.
Right. Right.
Right?
Right.
So,
And that's cool.
and then just to tie it back to Ishikawa, is that Ishikawa had these relationships with his students that were, again, wholesome, that that demonstrated to me, but also demonstrated to the students that there was like a caringness that he had with his
Right.
students. So having, just to reiterate what I said before, just just having that human component
Yeah.
is super important for not only just going back and forth with us or anybody else in this regular world, but also going back into history. It's like, okay, what makes him human, and that makes him her more
So,
more relatable to me. So
right. Absolutely. To show the vulnerability of who you are and what you care about, and showing the heart. If we don't show the heart of where we're at, then you got a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and I think that's one of the things that people are kind of craving nowadays. And it's great that your book, displays a lot of that. Not only the history, but the heart of it as well.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I also hope that those that will read this book um feel that it's not so historical that's boring, that like that heartfelt, that personality, that humanness of Ishikawa and the rest of the characters in his life gets lost. Because
Right.
if that gets lost, then you're just reading a bunch of facts. Those facts
Right.
have to
This
while having
those facts
facts
have a
is real.
connotation, they have a context, and
Yes,
to see that context, is important. Just as important
absolutely.
as the story itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's one thing to have all these random facts for trivia night, but if you have all these
Right.
random facts that don't mean anything, then they don't mean anything.
Right.
I hopefully this book for for the future readers, that they get to see that these facts have meaning, and they demonstrate again what kind of person Ishikawa was, but also what kind of people that he was interacting with
Right.
throughout his life.
And perhaps to even like inspire people to be like, look, this was pretty awesome what he did. Maybe I can do something similar.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because honestly, the past uh, informs and influences the not only the present, but then also the future. Because
Yeah.
if you're seeing something that didn't work well in the past, maybe we can fix it for
Right.
for the for the future. And
Or or as I'm sure you've experienced, you see something that used to work that we've got out of practice using, and then incorporating again, maybe in a new way or a different way to strengthen where we are presently.
Yeah, absolutely. Because those older ideas, they worked, and then now they don't work. Let's find out why they don't work.
Right,
It's the same thing with bodybuilding or weightlifting. There's the old style of weight of that training, and then there's the newer style of that. But then at the end of the day, it's like you can pick and choose which one works best for you.
right,
Um, kind of the same thing with when we look back in history, whether it's in the martial arts or in political science or economics or whatever have you. Whatever
right,
worked back then, we can try and make it work again. We just have to again make sure we take it out of that context and
right,
put it into our context to make sure that again
right.
it it
Exactly.
it works, because it can't just be like, oh yeah, so and so did this, all right, so let's do that, but why did he do that?
Right,
I don't know. So
right.
it's yeah, so that's all that is important.
So that's pretty cool. I mean, for I know just unrelated, but from a instructor standpoint, I used to be a nursing instructor, and one of the things I was like, well, you can teach somebody to be a nurse, right? And anybody can push this button when this happens, and that button then when that happens. But if you don't know the why behind what you're doing, you can't become a great nurse. You
Hmm.
know, just like I'm sure you teach a similar thing that you need to know why you're doing what you're doing. If you don't know why, then you can't become great at it. You're just gonna like be going through the motions, because that's what you were programmed to do.
Right. I mean, you can, I mean, on this instructional topic, you can go through the motions so that you know what the motions are, and then
Right.
after that you have to figure out, well, why am I doing these motions? Is it just that I'm bored, or it's like, well, then if I'm bored doing these motions, I just stop, right? And and if you're trying to teach new nurses, you can't go through the motions and be like, no, I'm done. You have to know, you have to know that why. It's like, yes, I'm doing this because if X, Y, and Z
Right.
happens, boom. So
And
same thing in martial arts. You got to learn that form first, and
that's right.
then here is the why. Excuse me. Um, you can try and put the why and how you do it together. Sometimes students don't get it right away, but as long as
And
you're putting in
sometimes,
that why
right,
somewhere, as long as you're putting
right.
that why
Sometimes you have
somewhere.
to create that, like you're talking about the foundations first. This is this movement, and this is this movement, and then later you learn why. That
Mhm.
happens too. Um, but eventually, as you grow, why is going to become a part of whatever it is. Whether why I'm making this move instead of that move in this situation. I know I was taught to do this, but then eventually, and it becomes natural. But why? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? You know, why did Ishikawa do what he did? What was his take on this? I just, yeah, I know for me that's important, and eventually I think for a lot of people that's important, you know, because a lot of times we do go through the motions, and sometimes, especially with a new habit, that's important,
Mhm.
to do that, to get a foundation so it becomes a habit. And then later on, it's like, oh, why? A lot of times the kids, it's the same thing. Well, why do I have to clean up this? Or why do I have to do this? And it's like, well, you do it, and then I'll explain
Yeah,
why.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Why I have to clean my room? I don't know. Do you want to live in filth all your life?
Right, but it's more than just clean.
What's filth, Daddy? Oh boy.
Right, right, right. But as you know, it's more than just doing the action and keeping your room clean, because
Mhm.
that creates a good mental practice. That
Yeah.
creates a good habit to keep your surrounding organized, to keep your surrounding so that later on you create your surroundings instead of your surroundings or environment creating you. It's a good habit to get into, and it's something small. And then all it is putting your socks in the dirty clothes.
Right, right,
That's how
right.
it starts.
yes, have one part of your room smell bad, not the whole part.
It's balance. It's
Yeah,
balance,
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. I totally agree. Um, yeah, and like with that, like let me make a social commentary, but like that thing for routine or foundation has kind of fallen a little bit to the wayside
Yeah,
in in light of whatever that someone wants to get to. So they're foregoing all this stuff to get to the end thing. I mean,
right.
actually, just I should draw it back to martial arts. There are some people who the teacher will show a technique and there's A, B, C, or three or four distinct parts, and everyone or there's some practitioners that just only focus on the last part. So they're like, all right, we just do this and then we just throw this way. And like, yeah,
All
but you're
right.
missing all this other stuff to make this work. And you're like, why is it not working? I'm doing this exactly what you're doing, and it's not working, Sensei. It's like, well, did you do one, two, or three? Oh,
Right.
right. Now do
But
one, two, or three.
it's creating that foundation for yourself. And if you don't have that foundation, you tend to fall on your butt quite a bit.
Very, very much
Literally.
so. Literally.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
so foundation and whatever you do is very important. And
right. And
anyone out there that wants to build a foundation, I am more than happy to be like, yep, go ahead. Foundation is
the-
important.
yeah, it's true. It's true. But you're right. I noticed that as well. And it's that practice, that habit that creates what you would call the deeper roots, right?
Mhm.
Without that foundation, it doesn't allow the roots to grow as deeply. And so you're like, I want it now, I want this, and it works to a degree. But then when the tree blows down, when the wind is strong, you're like, why'd that happen? It was
Yeah.
almost a full-grown tree. Well, it had no roots.
Mhm.
It had lacked that foundation, it lacked that habit, that discipline. Um, both are needed, both are essential.
Absolutely. Hands down.
Yeah. So, Antonio, I wanted to ask you, what couple things might you want to share with our viewers? One or two things that are maybe the at the core of your message of what you'd like to share.
Oh wow. The core of the message with history or the core of the message with Ishikawa? Because I can go a few different ways.
Both. Yeah, take one of each. Yeah, I like
Okay.
that.
So so first with history, the big broad thing is one, there is a need to preserve the past. One, not only to be like, oh hey, oh look, it's the past, but it's also, hey, look, it's the past. This is what we used to do here, and now we're doing it, and now we're doing something else different here. Where that change happened. So history is the study of change over time, and I
Yeah,
really enjoy talking to these older practitioners to see how they trained and they move through these things compared to what the students do today. So there is that preserving of history for future generations.
yeah,
But sorry, so number two aspect with that is preserving that information for future generations so that we can learn, and just like what we talked about a few minutes ago, is learn from the past and take what works there, move it over here in the present and in the future, take what didn't work, learn from it, and keep those mistakes back over there,
right.
back in the past. So anyone can learn something from history if they put their mind to it. With Ishikawa, main message there is that, or one of the main messages is that he was somebody, the highest rank judo practitioner in the United States, and he built up more of a judo scene and judo community within Philadelphia than what was there before in the early 1950s and late 1940s. Um, and he had such a relationship. He had such an impact on all the students that he had, um, that it's important to highlight that um, one, there was a very important judo teacher here in the United States for 20, 30 years. Um, Two, that you can have a student teacher relationship that is absolutely positive and can be um, caring both ways. Um, Shoot, I'm sorry. I thought I had a third thing, but I don't. But
That's okay.
um, but like that's also important to
The
just
relationship
yeah
is the
it,
key, I
yes
think, what you're talking about.
yes, and that you know there is something there is something relatable to Ishikawa, especially um with those relationships. And this is actually the third thing. Thank you for reminding me. And for his just his consistent determination and his drive just to teach judo no matter what. So
Yeah.
that's also another human relatable quality about him that I want to
His passion,
share
his
with
heart,
everybody.
you know?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Passion, heart about judo and everything about judo. He was, he came to teach, and that's exactly what he did.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing your story and his as well. Um, is there anything else you would like to add or share?
Uh, sure, yeah. So thank you for actually having me on here as well. I really did
Very
enjoy this
welcome.
conversation. Um, so one thing is that if you're interested in knowing more about Takahiko Ishikawa, there is a crowdfunding campaign going on right now to help finish out the last bits of the book. It's more like more the behind the scenes stuff. So,
Yeah,
if you would like to support that, you can support as low as $5 or however you would like to support. There are different tiers. Some of those tiers include having a Ishikawa bookmark. You can get an ebook. You can get an actual signed copy of the book when it publishes um, in September, or you can get the whole package with the bookmark, ebook, and copy, signed physical copy. So if you want to learn more about that, I will send you the link, and that should be
perfect,
somewhere.
perfect.
And
Yeah, and we can
and
put that up.
absolutely. Yeah, and if you're interested in more about martial arts history or any other more of the personal side of martial arts, um, you can check out my online chronicle, martial arts of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I can also link that as well. But yeah, thank you again. And if you want to read more about any of the martial arts people, just follow those links, and you won't be uh, you won't be disappointed.
Sounds good. I just that pretty much covers the interview, but there's a couple things that I wanted to talk to you personally, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I love martial arts. I don't do it on a regular basis now, but when
Hmm.
I used to, there was just a sense of like grounding and flow that was just, I mean, unlike any other habit that I've done my entire life. And one of the things that really interests me, because I know a lot of it is technique, and but I'm fascinated with the flow, the energetic aspect of it, the awareness of it.
Hmm.
Like I don't know if you've experienced, like when you connect with somebody else, you can kind of feel almost their body and their energy, and how to use that and redirect that. And I don't know if there's anything like that that you've experienced, But that's for me, one of the most fascinating parts of martial arts, besides just the physical aspects of it.
Yeah, well, the flow is, the flow is there. The flow is there. You can definitely feel the energy and the whole body of your partner.
Yeah.
Um, one thing one thing I do um sorry now. I'm very excited about this now. But but having flow between you and your partner is so great because it just makes it for uh, I for fun practice. You can do this and then boom, and it's like, oh wow, this was seamless. And I
Yes.
think that's what like a lot of the thing is to get to that flow point, to get to that seamless
Right.
point. And I know, like we mentioned before, like the martial arts have changed drastically. So now
Yes.
it's more of a partner drill to try and achieve this flow. At least here, using my my Aikido background, so you can get
Right.
that flow and feel it. And yeah, it's super enjoyable. Not only for being the thrower, but even
Right.
for being thrown. I mean, I
Because if you go with it and if you flow with it, you are less likely to get injured,
yeah,
as opposed if you resist it, then you
yeah.
it doesn't
N-
end
n-
well.
not only that, which is absolutely positively true. I mean, and once you've felt that flow and felt that energy and felt that commitment, and oh crap, this is like, holy crap, this was cool, both
Right.
as both as the thrower and as the one being thrown.
Right.
You can definitely feel someone who's not flowing. Like
Right.
you
And
are you are you are open to be like, oh crap, this person's not flowing with me. Darn
and I
it.
think that a lot of that is being present, being grounded, and being aware. I
Hmm.
think those aspects need to be kind of foundational before you can feel the flow. Because if
Right.
you can't feel where you're at,
Hmm.
you can't definitely feel when you interact with your opponent or partner or whatever, you know?
No, absolutely not. And I just want to add like just another foundational pillar is also commitment. And again, I'm using my Aikido background here and a little bit of judo, but like you have to have commitment, which actually kind of ties into like being present and in the moment. Because if you don't have that commitment, then the flow is not there. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So if you don't have that
And what you're talking
presentism,
about is committing your full self to,
y-
you know,
yeah,
the
yeah,
moment, to the practice.
yeah, and then that's actually where you come away. I mean, especially with me, and I know I'm weird because I've been doing it since like 6 years old, and it's just like I get thrown or my balance gets taken. And I'm like, man, I was really good. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, this is great. And then same thing when it's throws and there's like no issues. I'm like, how do I do that? How do I do that
Right.
so I can replicate it again and again?
And so, and you're right, because I don't know about you, but when I'm in that flow state, I'm not even thinking. I'm more of almost an observer. Like, oh, well, that was cool that I did that. I didn't even really mean or intend to do that. It just kind of happened.
Hmm.
And I think when you get in that flow state, you tend to go from and I find that you're less mechanical, and
Hmm.
and when you can not take your mind out of the equation and just be in your body and go with whatever's coming at you.
Yeah, there is, yeah, absolutely. What taking your mind out, just like you said, creates a whole thing that you can just be like, oh, I'm just gonna move. It's you're taking your mind out because you already know that those foundational movements, kind of like what we said
Right.
before about
Your
the
body already knows, it's already aware, it's already trained. Now, during the training process, it's a little different. It's helpful. It's
yeah,
like, oh, do I stand like this? Do I stand like
this or
this?
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that's when your mind is helpful, when you're building that foundation.
yeah. And then like you just described, when you're trying to get into that flow state or the flow
Right.
mindset or flow anything,
Right.
you have to start relying on what was the routine, what was the physical foundations, what makes these techniques or movements themselves so that you can just use them not think about it.
Right.
It becomes um like that. To put into context, well, I mean, maybe more hardcore context, like with judo randori, those high level guys are training one so high and so regularly and so often.
Yeah.
But once they see that opening, and actually the same thing is with Olympic fencing, and I have a small rant on that too if you want. But
That's cool.
but um but like with those judo guys, it's like, oh hey, look, there's that opening, and in like less than a second they're in it and they're flipping somebody over, and it's just
Right.
like it's just like boom, boom. It's like
And
holy
and a lot
crap.
of times it's not even something you see per se, it's something you feel.
Hmm.
It's just like, ah, here's where I need to be, or oh, here's where
The
I need to be.
yeah,
Or no, this
yeah,
is or and you can also feel when it's not quite right. You're like, no, that quite wasn't, I wasn't
yeah,
quite grounded there. The angle wasn't quite right.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think we touched upon this before. If I don't know where I'm at in this movement, then I don't know where
Right,
my partner's at. But if I know where I'm
right,
at, I have a general idea. This kind of goes back to what you said, like having that contact with your partner and just knowing
right,
where they're at full body. You just you can do it with your eyes closed and be like, oh yeah,
right.
this is your arm, this is your shoulder, and then and then most people, if I mean, if you're fighting handicapped people, maybe that's an issue. But like, every average human being has two arms, two legs, etc. So it's like, yeah, and then
Right,
it goes down here. But then you can feel if they're pushing this way, and it's like, okay, but you're pushing it this way, and you
right.
should
And
be
then you
having this. Yeah, right. It's it's
and
getting
knowing
so
when,
esoteric.
right,
It's
and knowing when to be firm in your stance and knowing when to be flexible in your
Mhm.
stance is key too. Because
Yeah.
that's like when you're throwing throws or even strikes or anything like that. A lot of people who are practice, you're loose.
Hmm.
You're not tight until the very last moment, and then you connect, and that's more effective than somebody who's power through, that slows you down. That takes away from your strength. It takes away from the energy. You know,
Oh
it's just
yeah,
things like that are just kind of cool.
yeah. I mean, after a while, the training starts to become like, oh, it becomes biomechanic, and
Right,
you're like, okay, well then how is so and so doing this movement? Because I want to see what their biomechanics are, not just like how am I supposed to do this technique right. So
right,
but like I mentioned way early, where families just my family divulges into a whole martial art conversation.
right,
But but there's like, hey, hey, I saw this thing on YouTube or on Facebook, and it's like, hey, you know, it's like something's like this, and it's like, well, that's kind of odd. Why is it not this? Why is it not that? And then like we have
right,
this whole conversation on like what why sorry, we have this whole conversation on what their why is to
right,
what they're doing with this movement or whatever. So it's once you know your own why, kind of like with
right,
with the nurse stuff, then you can find out, or you can you have the tools to try and find out somebody else's why, and
right.
it's it's a really nice thought experiment. It's frustrating, but it's a nice thought experiment.
I don't know. I like stuff like that. It's fun. Or even times you just see something and you play around. You're like, okay, this works and this works in this context. It doesn't work in this context. How could I apply it here? And you almost like feel your way through. Especially if you have somebody who's an aware, experienced partner, it's easy to go, okay, now this and that, and then you try a few things, and you're like, oh yeah, this works. Need to adjust it slightly. You know, just yeah,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that experimentation, I enjoy, and I wish more people did it, because that's where like the true discovery is. Is like,
yeah.
and even there, that's also finding out why certain techniques or moves work in certain contexts. So,
Right,
so then even there, you're finding multiple whys, and you're finding.
right.
I mean, I don't want to say compartmentalizing, what works here and what works there, but that's kind of important to figure out, so then you know what to do
The
from there.
framework and the
Yeah,
principle, right?
framework.
That's great. Basically, what principles are. That's a framework that you can work within. And the difference between a framework or a principle and a rule is that principles generally work under this context, right? But
Right.
rules, there's always going to be an exception to the rule. There's always going to
Mhm.
be, but it gives you a good guideline framework to work within that gives you the freedom to explore and express and do certain things or certain moves. Yet at the same time, you have that security of your framework. And as you learn more and more, that framework gets bigger and bigger, and those contexts build on each other as like building blocks, and until you get to that point where you're like, ah, yeah, this is pretty cool, and you see how everything connects, how this form of martial arts, oh, you see different strands of similarities in that technique or that style that's similar to what I'm familiar with. How can I take that and
Mhm.
incorporate it into what I know and experience?
Yeah, and that, well, I mean, yeah, that cross trading, but that, that cross pollination and cross figuring out everything is really, I feel, really crucial to understanding yourself as a martial artist, or maybe even as a person. And I know like a lot of stuff within the martial arts have been moving more towards mixed martial arts, and you have to do all this other stuff with it.
Right.
There is some truth to that, and then uh there's also some validity to being just specialized in one thing. But
Right.
I think, I think at the end, and now I'm starting to grandstand. But
That's all right.
but I think at the end, the stuff that the stuff that you specialize in should be that foundation to start taking some other stuff and putting it into, if not the larger art or system, but at least into what you're doing, so that what you need to do. And it's like I said before, it's a great thought experiment too, of just figuring out this and figuring out that and putting it into my own context, or
Right.
your own context. So
But it's part of the evolutionary process, right? It's not static. It's
yeah.
growing constantly. It's changing constantly. And though your foundations might remain the same, a lot of it, at the same time, you're learning and absorbing more and adapting and adjusting, and that's, I think, necessary to
Hmm.
grow in martial arts, whether you're just day one or 5 decades later, wherever
Hmm.
it happens to be. I think that's just as important, that you're open, that you're still learning, that you're still growing, that you don't just sit back and go like, all right, cool, I'm good, I know. But
Yeah.
as you know, that stems from the heart, the love of it. I'm
Hmm.
curious about this. I want to know
Yeah.
more. I want to adapt. How's this like your family conversations, like you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I want to add to that, but it's going to be really, really political on, on the one art side. So I'm going to keep that. But
I
I
mean,
totally,
I'm all good myself. So I mean,
no,
this part isn't,
no,
going
no,
out,
it's all
but
good.
yeah,
But but still, there's a lot of truth to um of evolving and taking in things and leaving things out, kind of like what Bruce Lee said. But there are some organizations that just want to keep everything at that standard, whatever that standard is, and it's like, but
you
why
impede your
don't we try
growth,
this? Yeah, yeah.
right?
Why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? And then they're like, eh. So like, s- so then I mean, and then there's actually a big parallel of between martial arts and religion, where it's like here is the organization says one thing, but then um what the individual does is just is just on their own, and
Right.
how it works for them. So
It's the framework, it's
yeah,
the
yeah,
principle, and then
yeah,
within that you
that
have your
it's
own individual style,
thing.
your own
Yeah,
individual expression, you know?
yeah,
That's
absolutely,
cool.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think we need more of that um within the martial arts. Or again, I'm just thinking more in terms of Aikido, Judo, but
Yeah.
more 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 of that individual expression, because I think once people make it their own, they're more inclined to be in it for the long haul.
Right. And I know once you get to that point where you begin to feel those things and feel that flow and feel the difference that it makes in your life doing that practice versus not doing that practice, it's hard to resist not doing it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and especially when you've been doing it for regularly for God knows how long. You're like, I should do this again. I mean,
Yeah.
anytime that there's a vacation, I'm like, well, I'm going to miss training. Might as well go on YouTube just so I can think about it too. And
Right.
you know what I mean? So if I'm not physically doing the training, I'll do the mental training. So
Well,
it's
honestly, they've shown that that is just as important or not or even more so important than the actual physical I mean, you have different studies where athletes will go ahead and just mentalize, go through the steps mentally
Mhm.
of what they're doing. And that has almost the same impact as people who physically train. Not that you need to skip out on that,
Right.
but I'm just saying that it is a very powerful tool, uh, the mental aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And excuse me, the mind's important, and that's where it goes back to those foundations where where you basically ingrain them in your mind, and then like your mind just goes like that, and then you can do whatever you need to do.
Right.
So yeah, so there's a lot of times where I do that, where I go through it in my head, or it's just on YouTube. And what's funny is that sometimes I'll watch this stuff before I go to bed, and it puts me asleep. So then, like, I guess and then subconsciously I'm actually thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's working or not, but I mean,
Oh, it does. It does. It certainly does. The subconscious mind is very powerful. And, I think that's what kind of does things. And that's what works with your body when you're doing some of this stuff, because the conscious is good for directing your attention. This is something I knew I'd like to digest. This is something new I'd like to learn. This is something I'd like to understand better. But then once that gets into your unconscious, you don't need to even worry about it at that point.
right, absolutely, absolutely.
It's just like autopilot. It's great.
Yes, autopilot is absolutely great, except for when you really need to be there.
Fair enough. But yeah. Yeah, that's just I've been in that situation a couple of times where somebody comes up behind you and grabs you and you almost have them over your back. You're like, oh crap. Don't do
Sorry,
that. Don't come
Dad.
up behind me like that. I recognize you now. That's why I stopped halfway through. But
Yeah, yeah. There was, yeah, just a random thing, but there was like a Facebook reel that I saw, I think a week or so ago, where like karate ruined my life, where it's a guy that's been trained in karate and like everything just revolves around karate. So someone scares him. It's like, oh, well, I'm sorry, that's that's what doing karate, and then it goes more into like, hey, this is how we hold the board
Right.
for breaking it, and the guy's like, I can't break it, I can't break it, and he goes and breaks it. It's like, damn it. And then like it's more of this stuff, and then it's like them at a job interview, and he's like, oh yeah, I went to this university or whatever, and the interview's like, yeah, so did I, and he gets up and he grabs he grabs his certificate, holds out like this. It's like, yeah, see, I did too. And the cry guy's like, no, I can't break it, I can't break it, I can't break it, and he breaks it. Of course, he doesn't get the job, and he's like, Fry's ruining my life.
That's funny.
It is. Well, it's more funny than the way that I explained it. So
No, it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's awesome. I like I said, it's something that I enjoy. I don't unfortunately practice like I used to. Um, it's difficult depending where you're located.
Mhm.
Different schools and different styles are hard to find if you
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So, but I know when I was doing in DC in the Krav that I loved the instructors because they used to incorporate some boxing, they used to
Hmm.
incorporate some Hapkido, they used to incorporate all these different types of styles into it, and it was like a good foundation. And then it was like branches of the tree, adding this part and adding that
Hmm.
part, and it was very enjoyable.
Yeah,
And they
totally.
focused on technique, which I enjoyed, because to me, just like body lifting or weightlifting or anything like that, you can do 1,000 reps, but if there are 1,000 reps in the wrong position, in the wrong, it's not going to help you. It's going to hurt you. You
Yeah,
know. So
yeah,
technique for me, I know is super important. Being in the right place, being at the right angle, and you can feel it. At a certain point. And so yeah, it's cool. At first, new things sometimes feel uncomfortable. It's like, oh, this feels backwards.
yeah, yeah. And
So
then once you get into the flow, it's
right,
like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get
right, yeah, exactly.
it now.
Takes a little time. Well, thank you, Antonio. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, yeah, yeah. Thank you again for having me here as well. I too enjoyed the conversation.